Good evening. Today is Monday, July 16th, 2018. I didn't think I'd have to do this, but apparently I do, because we live in a world where the mainstream moronic media can't seem to come to grips with the fact that President Donald Trump is in fact the president, and he has a responsibility to the United States of America, for which he takes that pretty darn seriously. Now, for all of you who are awake, you know exactly what's happening, but for those who are blissfully asleep in the netherworlds over there, and not really sure that President Trump is not a traitorous person, which is the most ridiculous thing I've heard coming out of Helsinki, Finland today. But let's examine exactly what Donald Trump said during the press briefing, because apparently the mainstream media, the Democrats, and now even a portion of Republicans in the establishment are unable to translate, for lack of a better word, exactly what the president is trying to say. Now, to anyone that is awake, you know exactly what he's saying. If you're not awake, I'm going to help you right now. Let's get to what President Donald Trump said exactly.
Thank you. I have just concluded a meeting with President Putin on a wide range of critical issues for both of our countries. We had direct, open, deeply productive dialogue. Went very well.
Is anybody confused at that point? They had an open dialogue and it went very well.
Before I begin, I want to thank President Niinisto of Finland for graciously hosting today's summit. President Putin and I were saying how lovely it was and what a great job they did.
He's thanking the president of Finland for hosting this event. It was very lovely.
I also want to congratulate Russia and President Putin for having done such an excellent job in hosting the World Cup.
He's thanking President Putin for hosting the World Cup, which is soccer, for those of you who do not know in the mainstream media.
It was really one of the best ever, and your team also did very well. It was a great job. I'm here today to continue the proud tradition of bold American diplomacy. From the earliest days of our republic, American leaders have understood that diplomacy and engagement is preferable to conflict and hostility.
Is anybody confused about that? The role of the president is to engage at the highest levels of diplomatic relations with other countries, Russia being another country.
A productive dialogue is not only good for the United States and good for Russia, but it is good for the world.
The president is implying and actually outright stating that dialogue is better than nuclear war. Okay? So if anybody's not clear about that, that's what he's saying.
The disagreements between our two countries are well known, and President Putin and I discussed them at length today.
He's stating that there is a rift between the United States and Russia, and they are well known to the world. I don't think anybody can deny that.
But if we're going to solve many of the problems facing our world, then we're going to have to find ways to cooperate in pursuit of shared interests.
The United States and Russia have mutual interests, to which the President of the United States and the President of Russia are trying to make amends and meet in the middle so that there is not a major conflict. Let's go on.
Too often in both recent past and long ago, we have seen the consequences when diplomacy is left on the table.
In the past, recently, and in the distant past, when diplomacy is not enacted as a first measure, major conflicts do result. There are plenty of items that you can point to around the world that will demonstrate this.
We have also seen the benefits of cooperation. In the last century, our nations fought alongside one another in the Second World War.
In the Second World War, the United States and Russia were in fact allies. Russia, it was Russia, at that time defeated Nazi Germany. They were a major player in making sure that Nazi Germany was defeated in World War II. The United States took care of the Japanese on the Western Front.
During the tensions of the Cold War, when the world looked much different than it does today, the United States and Russia were able to maintain a strong dialogue. But our relationship has never been worse than it is now.
Right now, the United States and Russia are at a point where if things do not correct course and rapidly, there is the real prospect of an armed conflict between two nuclear superpowers. Make no mistake, the tensions between the United States and Russia are at the highest they have ever been since the Cold War.
However, that changed as of about 4 hours ago.
As of 4 hours ago, the President of the United States and the President of Russia had productive dialogue to dial back the drums of war.
I really believe that. Nothing would be easier politically than to refuse to meet, to refuse to engage, but that would not accomplish anything.
If Donald Trump actually listened to people in Congress, people on the left, all the liberals, everybody that is anti-Trump and anti-Putin and anti-Russia and everything that goes along with it, then yes, Donald Trump would have failed to meet his diplomatic obligations as President of the United States and would have failed to meet the obligation of the President of the United States to deconflict with another major superpower. He ignored those people and did his job.
As president, I cannot make decisions on foreign policy in a futile effort to appease partisan critics or the media or Democrats who want to do nothing but resist and obstruct.
I think I've given you plenty of examples of the Democrats obstructing. Donald Trump is stating he will ignore it and move forward no matter what the left says, no matter what the right says, no matter what the establishment says, no matter what the media says. His obligation is to protect and defend the United States, make sure there are no conflicts that are not absolutely necessary.
Constructive dialogue between the United States and Russia afford the opportunity to open new pathways toward peace and stability in our world. I would rather take a political risk in pursuit of peace than to risk peace in pursuit of politics.
I hope everybody heard that. Donald Trump is willing to take a risk against the odds. He's willing to extend that olive branch out, meet with President Putin, who he knows everybody is looking at under a microscope. He's willing to do that anyway in pursuit of peace. He's going to give it one shot. That's what he's implying here.
As president, I will always put what is best for America and what is best for the American people.
Self-explanatory.
During today's meeting, I addressed directly with President Putin the issue of Russian interference in our elections. I felt this was a message best delivered in person. Spent a great deal of time talking about it.
So, President Trump, at the behest of his advisors, I'm sure, but as well as listening to the American people, confronted the Russian president, President Putin, about meddling in the United States elections.
And President Putin may very well want to address it, and very strongly, because he feels very strongly about it, and he has an interesting idea. We also discussed one of the most critical challenges facing humanity, nuclear proliferation. I provided an update on my meeting last month with Chairman Kim on the denuclearization of North Korea, and after today, I am very sure that President Putin and Russia want very much to end that problem, going to work with us, and I appreciate that commitment.
Donald Trump and President Putin talked about decreasing the number of nuclear weapons in the world, and specifically the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
The President and I also discussed the scourge of radical Islamic terrorism. Both Russia and the United States have suffered horrific terrorist attacks and we have agreed to maintain open communication between our security agencies to protect our citizens from this global menace.
The United States and Russia are going to work together against ISIS and other terrorist organizations like Al-Nusra, Boko Haram, all those good ones.
Last year, we told Russia about a planned attack in St. Petersburg, and they were able to stop it cold.
The United States and Russia share intelligence. Last year, the United States informed Russia about a pending attack in St. Petersburg, Russia. Russia responded, thwarted the attack. Victory for the joint process at work.
They found them. They stopped them. There was no doubt about it.
As I just said.
I appreciated President Putin's phone call afterwards to thank me. I also emphasized the importance of placing pressure on Iran to halt its nuclear ambitions and to stop its campaign of violence throughout the area, throughout the Middle East.
The United States and Russia are working together to make sure that Iran does not become a nuclear superpower themselves, because that will be very destabilizing to the Middle East, as well as to Russian interests in that region, because Russia needs the Middle East to run its oil and gas pipelines through, and it doesn't help if Iran is a nuclear superpower that's working against Russia and also working against the United States vis-a-vis through Israel and our allies in that region. So, therefore, the United States and Russia must work together in a geopolitical situation to make sure that Iran does not become a nuclear superpower dummies.
As we discussed at length, the crisis in Syria is a complex one.
Self-explanatory, but the crisis in Syria is extremely complex because there are multiple factions of Muslims and every other possible scenario you can throw into a tinderbox of the Middle East and call it Syria, where there's fighting over the Golan Heights, etc., etc., etc. You're not going to end this one simply, but suffice to say, the United States and Russia probably need to work together on this one because there are so many players that are trying to destabilize Syria and make sure that it just keeps going on. So if you want an end to Syria, you need Russia's involvement.
Cooperation between our two countries has the potential to save hundreds of thousands of lives. I also made clear that the United States will not allow Iran to benefit from our successful campaign against ISIS. We have just about eradicated ISIS.
You understand? The United States has basically declared a victory against ISIS, and it needs Russian cooperation again in Syria and with Iran. It's very good to have two nuclear superpowers working together to make sure that the region doesn't become anchored down in another prolonged crisis in the Middle East.
In the area. We also agreed that representatives from our national security councils will meet to follow up on all of the issues we addressed today and to continue the progress we have started right here in Helsinki.
They started the talks today. They agree they're going to continue talking. That is a good thing.
Today's meeting is only the beginning of a longer process, but we have taken the first steps toward a brighter future, and one with a strong dialogue and a lot of thought. Our expectations are grounded in realism, but our hopes are grounded in America's desire for friendship, cooperation, and peace. And I think I can speak on behalf of Russia when I say that also.
They are both hopeful that they can work together versus combating each other on the air, the land, and the sea.
President Putin, I want to thank you again for joining me for these important discussions and for advancing open dialogue between Russia and the United States.
President Putin, thank you for meeting with us. It was good to have an open dialogue.
Our meeting carries on a long tradition of diplomacy between Russia, the United States, for the greater good of all. And this was a very constructive day. This was a very constructive few hours that we spent together. It's in the interest of both of our countries to continue our conversation, and we have agreed to do so. I'm sure we'll be meeting again in the future, often. and hopefully we will solve every one of the problems that we discussed today. So, again, President Putin, thank you very much.
Pretty clear. Thank you for talking. Thank you for making sure we're not going to start firing off nuclear weapons at each other. Thank you for the offer to continue talking so that we may all benefit from the result of two nuclear superpowers sitting down at the table, breaking bread and talking versus shooting. I hope I made that clear. We're going to move on to the question and answer period because this is where the media really doesn't get it.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Алексей Мешков, я представляю информационное агентство «Интерфакс». У меня вопрос к господину президенту Соединенных Штатов. Во время своего недавнего европейского турне вы сказали, что реализация трубопроводного проекта «Северный поток-2» и других проектов делает Европу заложницей России. И вы предлагали избавить Европу от этой зависимости путем поставок американского сжиженного газа. Но вот эта зима холодная, она показала живучесть нынешней системы энергоснабжения Европы, в то время как Соединенные Штаты вынуждены были покупать дополнительные объемы сжиженного газа, в том числе российского, для Бостона. У меня вопрос. Вот, реализация вашей идеи, она более политическая, и не приведет ли она к тому, что в энергоснабжении Европы системе образуется дыра, в которую попадут прежде всего страны-потребители? И второй вопрос, если вы позволите, перед встречей с господином Путиным вы назвали его соперником, но оставили надежду на то, что, возможно, вам удастся эти отношения вывести в дружеские. Вам это удалось? Спасибо.
No, actually, I called him a competitor, and a good competitor he is. And I think the word competitor is a compliment. I think that we will be competing when you talk about the pipeline. I'm not sure necessarily that it's in the best interests of Germany or not, but that was a decision that they made. We'll be competing. As you know, the United States is now, or soon will be, but I think it actually is right now the largest in the oil and gas world. So we're going to be selling LNG, and we'll have to be competing with the pipeline.
So if you're not following along here, the United States will be a direct competitor to Russia to supply energy to Germany and parts of Europe. That directly impacts Russia. Donald Trump is making it kind of clear that he doesn't want to call Russia an adversary, much like we don't call South Korea an adversary for selling electronics around the world, where we also sell electronics around the world. They're a competitor. Donald Trump is trying to put Russia back in the game as a competitor versus an adversary or an enemy. That's a good thing. Being a competitor sort of levels out the playing field and makes everybody feel good. It's better than being an adversary or an enemy, because then the right to strike militarily against financial interests starts to come into play. That's a bad thing. That is when wars break out.
And I think we'll compete successfully, although there is a little advantage locationally. So I just wish them luck. I mean, I did. I discussed with Angela Merkel in pretty strong tones, but I also know where they're all coming from, and they have a very close source. So we'll see how that all works out. But we have lots of sources now, and the United States is much different than it was a number of years ago when we weren't able to extract what we can extract today. So today we're number one in the world at that, and I think we'll be out there competing very strongly. Thank you very much.
Я позволю себе добавить два слова. Мы говорили с господином президентом, в том числе и на эту тему. Нам известна позиция президента. Но я считаю, что мы, как крупнейшие нефтегазовые державы, а Соединенные Штаты тоже являются такой страной, могли бы конструктивно работать по регулированию международных рынков, потому что мы не заинтересованы как в чрезвычайном падении цен ниже низшего предела, поскольку от этого будут страдать наши производители. Кстати говоря, в том числе и в Соединенных Штатах, имея в виду сланцевый нефть и газ.
President Putin is saying here that he does not want to start getting into a trade war with the United States on its exports of energy, liquid natural gas, specifically. The United States has ample resources to probably outbid Russia on every aspect, except for areas that are just geographically inaccessible. The United States could probably outbid Russia across the board. Donald Trump and President Putin are making a business deal behind the scenes here to make sure that they are competitors and are willing, it appears, to not engage in a trade war on energy.
За определенными рамками наступает, исчезает рентабельность производства. Не заинтересованы также мы и в чрезмерно высоких ценах, потому что это будет убивать переработку машиностроения и прочие отрасли экономики. У нас здесь есть о чем поговорить, есть поле для сотрудничества. Это первое. Второе, что касается Северного потока-2. Господин президент высказывал озабоченности в связи с возможным исчезновением транзита через Украину. Я заверил господина президента в том, что Россия готова сохранить этот транзит. Более того, мы готовы продлить транзитный контракт, который истекает в следующем году, в случае урегулирования спора между хозяйствующими субъектами в Стокгольмском арбитражном суде.
Dispute will be settled in the Stockholm Arbitration Court.
The first question from a U.S. journalist goes to Jeff Mason from Reuters.
I just want to make sure that everybody focuses on this question right here. This is the question that everybody in the mainstream media is playing over and over. This is the question that they are getting wrong.
Mr. President, you tweeted this morning that it's U.S. foolishness, stupidity, and the Mueller probe that is responsible for the decline in U.S. relations with Russia. Do you hold Russia at all accountable for anything in particular? And if so, what would you consider them that they are responsible for?
Yes, I do. I hold both countries responsible. I think that the United States has been foolish. I think we've all been foolish. We should have had this dialogue a long time ago, a long time, frankly, before I got to office. And I think we're all to blame. I think that the United States now has stepped forward along with Russia, and we're getting together, and we have a chance to do some great things, whether it's nuclear proliferation in terms of stopping. We have to do it. Ultimately, that's probably the most important thing that we can be working on. But I do feel that we have both made some mistakes. I think that the probe is a disaster for our country. I think it's kept us apart. It's kept us separated. There was no collusion at all. Everybody knows it. People are being brought out to the fore. So far that I know, virtually none of it related to the campaign. And they're going to have to try really hard to find somebody that did relate to the campaign. That was a clean campaign. I beat Hillary Clinton easily. And frankly, we beat her. And I'm not even saying from the standpoint, we won that race. And it's a shame that there can even be a little bit of a cloud over it. People know that, people understand it, but the main thing, and we discussed this also, is zero collusion. And it has had a negative impact upon the relationship of the two largest nuclear powers in the world. We have 90% of nuclear power between the two countries. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous what's going on with the probe.
For President Putin, if I could follow up as well.
Now, just to interrupt here, Donald Trump didn't say anything about selling America out. What he said very specifically, both countries were to blame here. He is not saying that the United States is 100% wrong and Russia is 100% right. What he said was both actors in this scenario, the United States and Russia, have a role in why the relationship has soured over the years. That is a true statement. Donald Trump is also correct by stating the Mueller probe has in fact driven a wedge right down the center of the United States of America. Nothing new has happened in 2016 that has not been happening since the Cold War started. Russia has been meddling in the United States. So the fact that this is even coming up as a surprise to anyone on the left or the mainstream media, both of whom are complicit in this, they are living in an alternative reality. The actual reality is that the United States and Russia have been at each other's front doors with spycraft since the 1950s. This is no surprise. Donald Trump is extending the olive branch as a diplomat would to try and meet in middle ground and see if a relationship can be built moving forward.
Why should Americans and why should President Trump believe your statement that Russia did not intervene in the 2016 election, given the evidence that U.S. intelligence agencies have provided? And will you consider extraditing the 12 Russian officials that were indicted last week by a U.S. grand jury?
Well, I'm going to let the president answer the second part of that question. But as you know, the whole concept of that came up perhaps a little bit before, but it came out as a reason why the Democrats lost an election, which, frankly, they should have been able to win because the Electoral College is much more advantageous for Democrats, as you know, than it is to Republicans. We won the Electoral College by a lot, 306 to 223, I believe. And that was a well-fought battle. We did a great job. And frankly, I'm going to let the president speak to the second part of your question. But just to say it one time again, and I say it all the time, there was no collusion. I didn't know the president. There was nobody to collude with. There was no collusion with the campaign. And every time you hear all of these, 12 and 14, it's stuff that has nothing to do, and frankly, they admit, these are not people involved in the campaign. But to the average reader out there, they're saying, well, maybe that does. It doesn't. And even the people involved, some perhaps told misstories, although in one case the FBI said there was no lie. There was no lie. Somebody else said there was. We ran a brilliant campaign, and that's why I'm president. Thank you.
Okay, so here we go. This is the question that started literally blowing up the brains and the heads of liberals and mainstream media pundits alike. But I think a reasonable person understands exactly what he's saying. Here's the question. Listen to the answer.
Trump, yes. You first. Just now, President Putin denied having anything to do with the election interference in 2016. Every U.S. intelligence agency has concluded that Russia did. My first question for you, sir, is who do you believe? My second question is, would you now, with the whole world watching, tell President Putin, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn him to never do it again?
So let me...
Before he even answers, if this was any other president, they wouldn't even entertain that question, let alone answer. They would say, that is not an appropriate question for me to answer at this point in time. He's standing there with another world leader, and like we've seen so many other times, he just gets barraged with questions that are meant to put him on the spot, and knowing that he's Trump, he's going to answer. Now, I might suggest to the president, you don't need to answer every single question lobbed at you, but I'm kind of glad that he does, because you get to see the inner workings and the warped mind of the media, where all they're doing is they're trying to set him up for a failure. It's meant to derail any positive talks that just happened. That's what this question is meant to do. It's meant to make Donald Trump choose between his intelligence agencies or the person he's trying to literally make amends with right there standing next to him. And if he says the wrong thing, that gets derailed instantly.
Just say that we have two thoughts. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the server. Why haven't they taken the server? Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee? I've been wondering that. I've been asking that for months and months, and I've been tweeting it out and calling it out on social media. Where is the server? I want to know, where is the server, and what is the server saying? With that being said, all I can do is ask the question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be, but I really do want to see the server. But I have confidence in both parties. I really believe that this will probably go on for a while, but I don't think it can go on without finding out what happened to the server. What happened to the servers of the Pakistani gentlemen that worked on the DNC? Where are those servers? They're missing. Where are they? What happened to Hillary Clinton's emails? 33,000 emails, gone, just gone. I think in Russia they wouldn't be gone so easily. I think it's a disgrace that we can't get Hillary Clinton's 33,000 emails. So I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today. And what he did is an incredible offer. He offered to have the people working on the case come and work with their investigators with respect to the 12 people. I think that's an incredible offer.
I'm going to stop it right there. Let's start with the last part first. When he says Putin was very strong and powerful about his response, that's all he's meaning. The only thing he means is that Putin was adamant Russia didn't do it. That's all he's saying. Nothing more, nothing less. Everybody's reading way too far into that one. Going backwards, President Trump rightfully is asking, because the press put him on the spot. So in all fairness, Donald Trump gets to fire back and push back on a press that's asking him a very uncomfortable question in front of another world leader that you're trying to make peace with. Donald Trump has every right to push back and say, show me the proof. Show us the proof. Everyone is asserting Russia did it. Show us the money. Show us the proof. Where's the proof? The FBI never touched the DNC server. The FBI never took possession and analyzed who exactly, quote unquote, hacked into the DNC servers. We all know somebody from the inside did it. But the FBI never saw the server. So the FBI doesn't know exactly who did it. They're relying on a company named CrowdStrike to tell them who did it. So it's okay that the FBI relies on a third-party software vendor to tell them who hacked the election, which affects national security. You understand? This is a national security issue because now you're accusing a nuclear superpower of hacking into an election, and the FBI never saw the server or analyzed it. And then we have Imran Awan from Pakistan, who was accused of taking House Democrat IT information, their servers, had possession of their emails, and everything was getting routed through the House server, and he's allowed to take a pass. He's allowed to take a walk. Meanwhile, the evidence for that case is gone. So nobody's investigated that little piece. Donald Trump has every right to question that. Every American should be questioning why the FBI never looked at those servers and why Imran Awan was set free when both of those cases affected national security, and they dare accuse the President of the United States of being a traitor? It is his job to be a diplomat. That is his job. And it's his job to protect the United States of America first and foremost. And if that means talking to an adversary, then you goddamn talk to an adversary. The media is responsible for this division in the United States of America, and it is the media that should be held treasonous. It's people like CNN, Anderson Cooper, Wolf Blitzer, and that whole crew. And then MSNBC with Rachel Maddow, Joe What's-His-Face, and Mika Brzezinski in the morning. Those are your traitors. Those are the ones that don't want to see the United States succeed. They're the ones who want to see the President of the United States fail at all costs. So if you're looking for a traitor, just tune into CNN or MSNBC.